Attention comedy musicians and comedy music fans! The Logan Awards are taking open nominations for outstanding comedy songs and videos released last year for this year's awards. Did you release a comedy song or music video in 2021, or have a favorite comedy song or video that was released then? Then nominate it for the Logan Awards today. The Logan Awards are essentially the Comedy Music Awards, sponsored annually by the Funny Music Project, and are presented in 3 categories: Outstanding Original Comedy Song, Outstanding Parody Song, and Outstanding Comedy Music Video. If you have a comedy song that was released in 2021 that you'd like to nominate for 2022's awards, head to LoganAwards.com and click the Nominations tab at the top. There is a minimum and maximum of 5 nominations per person. Hurry! Nominations close this year on January 22nd. For more details about Logan himself, the awards, and more, check out LoganAwards.com. Help us commemorate this year's best comedy songs and music videos with a trophy, the way they do with every other form of entertainment. But if you want your favorites to win, you have to nominate them by January 22nd, 2022. Get your nominations in now at LoganAwards.com. Brought to you by TheFump.com.
I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
What a week it's been. After, we talked about this. This episode is going to be dedicated to Betty White. However, after we recorded last week's episode, we got the news of the legendary Sidney Poitier's passing. And right before we record this episode, we learned of the passing of Bob Saget. Betty White, Sidney Poitier, Bob Saget, just gut punch, gut punch, gut punch.
Yeah, if you're wondering the Disney connection for the other two, Sidney Poitier was actually on the board of directors for the Walt Disney Company from 1995 to 2003. Maybe a lesser known part of his career. Raisin in the Sun and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Heat of the Night, yeah.
Heat of the Night. Interestingly, another Disney connection there when they have Pumbaa in The Lion King say, "They call me Mr. Pig."
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
They call me Mr. Pig! Ah!
And he was just a few years younger than Betty White. I think it was 95, 96?
94 when he passed, yeah. So yeah, not terribly far off there.
Yeah. Poitier breaking down barriers. The first black actor to be nominated for the Best Actor award at the Academy Awards, and the first black actor to actually win that award. Not in the same year, but it happened.
Yeah, born in the Bahamas, when it was still a colony of the British Empire, and learned to read just so that he could become an actor. Learned to read just so he could read scripts and audition because he wanted to become a film actor.
He became a legend, not only a legendary actor, but a legendary director as well. And
he ended up getting a knighthood by Queen Elizabeth II in the 70s. Won pretty much every acting award there was to win. One of the best of his generation, if not of all time. Just incredible talent. not sure we'll ever see that like again. A great loss, but not quite as unexpected, sad to say, given his age, as it was with Bob Saget.
Yeah, Bob Saget, Full House, America's TV Dad, of course, the original host of America's Funniest Home Videos, which is still on the air. I actually found out.
Yeah,
Alfonso Ribeiro is
kinda,
actually the current host. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually the main kind of Disney connection for him. That's always been a Disney property.
It's on Disney Plus. America's Funniest Home Videos is on Disney Plus.
Yeah. Full House, although it did air on ABC, not a Disney property. A lot of people think it is.
Because it was part of that original TGIF lineup. It was one of the many sitcoms that went to Disneyland, so they think all of those sitcoms that went to Disneyland were owned by Disney.
Yeah, it's not. It's a Warner thing, I believe. But Funniest Home Videos. Yeah. There's your Disney.
Before YouTube, we had America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah, and I actually went back and watched some of those episodes, and man, he had the perfect delivery for that. It's very, very sad. His final social media post was just hours before his death, and he had been back doing stand-up and was apparently very, very happy and very optimistic about a new direction he was going with his stand-up show, and was talking about looking forward to doing that.
If you've never seen Bob Saget's stand-up, the complete opposite of his TV persona. His TV persona is very squeaky clean, and I don't just mean that as a pun on Danny Tanner. But, he was always, he was the TV dad. He was like even on America's Funniest Home Videos, he was just a squeaky clean guy. But went full blue, as they say, on stage.
Yeah, all you need to do is
look up his Half Baked, his cameo in Half Baked.
I was going to say watch The Aristocrats.
Oh, yeah, that too.
In which he basically outdoes everyone else in that documentary. Or maybe if you cannot handle blue humor, I'm not even sure that's the right word for it. I mean, it is a documentary about the quote unquote filthiest joke in all of comedy. But it's a good documentary, but you have to be able to handle quite a bit of obscenity and offense to be able to sit through that documentary. Apparently, the news of his death broke during a broadcast of America's Funniest Home Videos, and so they actually broke into the program to announce it, which I think is such an absurdly offensive thing that Bob Saget would have kind of loved that.
I think only Bob Saget could have gotten away with that.
Yeah, it's like, I will preempt this feel-good show for the news of my own death. Seems like a very Bob Saget thing to do. But apparently, despite all of his kind of offensiveness on stage, he was apparently the nicest person in Hollywood, and would not speak ill of anyone off stage. He would roast you absolutely on stage. But off stage did not have a mean word to say about anyone. It was all a part of the act, it was.
And even part of the act was him making fun of him being known as the TV dad. You know?
Oh yeah.
That was he played into it.
A great loss to comedy and great loss to acting, I guess.
I mean, like I said, within 2 weeks, we lost one of the great female comedians in Betty White, one of the greatest stand-up comedians in Bob Saget, and a great comedic director in Sidney Poitier.
Yeah,
the world of
he's
comedy
remembered
lost
as
a
such
lot.
a dramatic actor, but he had such an eye for comedy in his directing. Yeah.
Stir Crazy with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
So it's like the world of comedy lost 3 icons within 2 weeks.
2022 is not pulling any punches.
It really is 2022, isn't it?
Yeah, we had hoped it wouldn't be, but there we go.
Betty White, Sidney Poitier, Bob Saget, we drink to you.
Yeah, and keep drinking and keep drinking. But we are here today to talk about one of the great comedy series of all times, honestly.
The Golden Girls. Thank you for being a friend. That theme song will stay in your head forever.
Thank you for being a friend.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times on the show. Just we are out of the, well, let's just say it, the golden age of TV theme songs, and I miss TV theme songs so much.
Yeah, now it's just sometimes you don't even get an intro. You get the start of the show.
Boing.
You
Like
get one note.
that.
Yeah, or not even at all. You just get the title of the show on the screen, and then just boom, the episode starts.
Yeah. Or the title as the episode is starting,
Yeah.
But this one, great opening theme song.
Written by Andrew Gold, and which was a hit for him in the 70s.
Thank you for being a friend.
I will say that they assembled possibly the best cast in history for this series.
Yeah. We got the legendary B. Arthur as Dorothy. I guess you can kind of say she's kind of the main character of the Golden Girls, even though it was an ensemble.
Well, yeah, they got 4 women who were all very well known by the time they ended up on this show. I guess B. Arthur would have been one of the standouts because she had come off of a very successful series of her own just a few years beforehand. Of course, she had been Maude. And then, of course, Betty White was just the queen of television for decades. She had been working in television since the advent of television. We didn't just lose, a golden girl or, a queen of comedy or what. We lost the best password player who ever lived. Okay, and as a huge fan of Password, that really hit me. All right, you do not understand how dominating this woman was at Password. But then, of course, she had also done Mary Tyler Moore Show for years, and she had played Sue Ann Nivens on that show, who was basically Blanche,
The man hungry kind of woman.
Yeah, and she was Sue Ann Nivens, the happy homemaker, and she did the cooking show on the. I don't know how much you watched Mary Tyler Moore, but I was obsessed with it as a kid. It was one of the constants on Nick at Night when I was growing up, and I watched Nick at Night every single night.
And yeah, you mentioned Mary Tyler Moore. Not long ago, we lost Ed Asner too.
Yeah. Her Sue Ann Nivens character on there was her persona on her TV show was very Martha Stewart. And I'm talking old school Martha Stewart before she hooked up with Snoop. Okay. It was very much, I am the prim and proper cooking show. I will do my cooking show. I will tell you how to be the perfect housewife. and keep your house neat and tidy and make the perfect souffle. And then as soon as the cameras were off, she was rubbing at Asner's bald head and being like, why don't you come back to my bedroom and I will show you what to do with your hands. And you know, like, it's like anytime a man walked in the room, it was like, a man, you know. Okay, so that was her character. So she was basically Blanche. And when they cast the show, they were like, oh, well, we need a randy older lady to play Blanche. Why don't we get Betty White? Because she did that for years on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And we know that she can do those off-color jokes. And instead, they were like, well, instead of her just being Sue Ann Nivens Part 2, you know, she was like, I don't want to be typecast for another series as, you know, the man chasing sex-crazed woman. So at the last minute, they were like, well, why don't you be Rose?
Yes, the very naive Rose.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Rose was that apparently a lot of those, like, once she said she had trouble figuring out who Rose was. Because all the other characters had very clear, like B. Arthur as Dorothy. I mean, I hate to say it, but it was just kind of Maud again. It was just B. Arthur kind of in most of those sitcoms. She just kind of played B. Arthur. So it was a very similar character to what she had played before. And Blanche was just, she's Southern and she chases men and makes jokes about, you know,
Sex.
So, and Sophia was just, she says mean, snarky things because that part of her brain has been damaged.
She's old. She don't give an F anymore.
Yeah, it's just whatever is the first thought in her brain, no matter how mean it is, she says it. Okay, fine. But Rose was a very difficult character. There's not, you know, it's kind of a throwback to some of the ditzy blonde characters, but, you know, usually ditzy blondes are also sex pots, but that's not Rose. You know, she's very sweet and childlike, but she does have a bit of an edge to her. You know, Rose is a very kind of singular character. So I can see why she had trouble with it, but after she got who Rose was, apparently a lot of those St. Olaf stories were her just ad-libbing.
There's a great outtake that kind of circulated social media after her passing, where she's doing one of these stories, and B. Arthur and Rue McCallaghan are just breaking. They're trying to keep it going, trying to keep straight faces, and they can't.
I'm not even sure that was an outtake. I think that's just in the episode. Yeah, but I just, it's so adorable, and it's such a, like I said, such a kind of singular character. I can't really think of another character that's like Rose, and it really is just such a creation of Betty White after that. You know, after I think she kind of clued into where the character was going, I think she kind of shaped a lot of that. She said that they told her that Rose was terminally naive, and after that she said she got it.
But if you cross Rose,
oh yeah, but
hell hath no fury.
Had such an edge, which I loved.
We'll talk about when we get to the episodes.
Yeah. But moving on to round out the cast.
Callahan as Blanche.
Yeah, we got finally we ended up with our Blanche in Rue McClanahan, and so Rue McClanahan had worked with B. Arthur on Maude before she ended up on the Golden Girls, and she had also worked on Mama's Family. And Mama's Family had also had some guest appearances by Betty White. I don't think that Betty White and Rue McClanahan were ever in the same episode on Mama's Family, but I'm not entirely sure on that. But yeah, so a lot of sitcom overlap at the time. But she ended up getting the part as Blanche, and if you watch the pilot, Blanche doesn't quite have her Southern accent yet, but as they were retooling for the full series, she told the producers that she really wanted to play Blanche as a kind of Mae West kind of thing, and so she added the kind of Southern accent to help her get a kind of Southern take on a Mae West kind of character, which, Mae West not Southern, but she wanted that kind of heavy accent to help her kind of deliver those lines. I just love everything about her portrayal, in that. It's so over the top, but somehow it kind of works. She's one of the few people who, I've got my little skin crawlies about non-Southerners doing the Southern accent thing, but for some reason it's too adorable with her. And then, of course, rounding out our foursome, we have Estelle Getty.
Estelle Getty as Sophia, who has the most connections to every other show, because not only she is on the Golden Girls and Golden Palace, but Empty Nest, Nurses, and Blossom.
Yeah.
This character was all over primetime TV way into the mid-90s.
Yeah, Mad About You, The Nanny.
As Sophia. As Sophia. Like this isn't Estelle Getty as someone else. This is Estelle Getty as Sophia. So this character just lived on and on and on way past the Golden Girls.
It was kind of interesting because she was cast as the oldest member.
Yeah, she's, B. Arthur's mother, but I believe she was the youngest cast member.
She was not the youngest. Rue McClanahan was the youngest, but she was younger than B. Arthur by a year. So she was, but she looked, because of her height and so much smaller and less kind of imposing than B. Arthur was. She just seemed kind of frailer and older. So she was cast to play like 20 years older than she was. So she was basically the same age as the rest of the cast. But Sophia is supposed to be like a good 20 years older than the rest of them.
And of course, the name, the Golden Girls, refer to the golden years of your life, your 50s, your 60s, when you're reaching retirement age. Oh, that's so funny nowadays.
Yeah, a thing we will never get. Yeah, we're in our 40s and trying to start a career, much less end one. Interestingly, it has been pointed out that the women of the Golden Girls are actually younger than the women on the current reboot of Sex and the City.
We've talked about, how we have women who are in their 50s now who we kind of talked about it, Marissa Tomei and Ming Na Wen, and they're in their 50s, but they don't look in their 50s. And then you have these women in the Golden Girls who are 50 and 60-year-old women who look like 50 and honestly, with the makeup and the wigs they give them, make them look older.
Well, I think they were supposed to be roughly. I think the median age for them was supposed to be about 54 in the premiere of the show. So that's what we're working with here.
Yes, and so you get the general notion of most people, when they think of an 50-year-old woman, they'll think of the Golden Girls. This is what a 50-year-old woman looks like. And you look at the real life 50-year-old women, and they're still very much attractive. Very, they're still doing it, as it were.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, though, is that it's also, changing up society.
Yeah.
People were retiring. I mean, when this show came on, this was my grandparents' age. They had retired by that point. This was roughly the age that, my grandmother loved this show when it was on. And these women were roughly her age. This was kind of, my grandfather was still alive at the time, So it was, she wasn't a widow like the women in the show, but, this was a thing that, she looked like the women in the show. She acted sort of like the women in the show. My grandmother was a very conservative, church-going woman compared to the women in the show. But it was the time. It would be different now, of course. You're talking about people in their early to mid 50s would be older Gen X at this point. It's a very different thing, and also medical science has gone, you wouldn't really be retired, even though there at least two of them still work mostly.
Yeah, in the series, yeah. Blanche in the show works at the museum, Rose is a grief counselor, and Dorothy is a teacher. Yeah. So they're still working.
They might not work full time. It's hard to tell, because
depending on who's writing the episode that day.
Yeah. And a lot of people, even after they retire from their main career, did and still do, work part-time. So it's an interesting thing of how they're set up and how they're living. Whereas today, depending on, you would start looking at people to retire in their 60s, if not later. You would not think about certain things that they talk about in the show as being happening until later in their lives, things like that. So it's interesting to see how the changing nature of society has gone on in just kind of what we think of as different phases of our life as well. In that, if you were to show people this series now and say, what do you think the ages of the women would be, I think people would not guess that they are as young as they are meant to be. So, except for Sophia, I think people would probably guess that Sophia is probably meant to be around the same age.
And this is a straight up Disney-owned series, pretty much from the beginning. At least pretty much from the beginning. In some countries, this show is on Disney Plus. It is not on Disney Plus in the United States where we're at. We are watching it on Hulu itself, mostly owned by Disney. It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say that to somebody, they're gonna like, no, this is not a Disney-owned series. There's no way.
But it is a Disney-owned series because all 4 of these women were named Disney Legends in 2009 because of the Golden Girls. So all 4 of these women, Bea Arthur, Betty White, Rue McClanahan, and Estelle Getty, are Disney Legends due to their work on the Golden Girls.
There are still people that I know to this day who don't accept Star Wars and Marvel as Disney. Like, I know Disney owns, but I don't really see that as Disney, And I can kind of see, like, a lot of the shows that Disney owns, especially like the Golden Girls, which does deal with a lot of serious subjects, as we'll get into, that's a little too much. That doesn't fit the Disney mold that so many people have,
It is. I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So let's actually get talking about the actual series, and no better way to start than with the very first episode, the pilot.
also called The Engagement.
Also just called The Golden Girls, at least as far as Hulu is concerned. So yeah, in this episode, Blanche meets her new boyfriend, and pretty much as soon as they start dating, he asks her to marry him. And that whole, we're not getting any younger, and they decide to just have this wingding, fly-by-night marriage.
The only problem is that this might, if Blanche and her new boyfriend get married and he moves into Blanche's house, this will displace Dorothy and Rose, who live with Blanche. The 3 of them are roommates, and they live in a house owned by Blanche.
Yeah, this is the setup of the series. The house is owned by Blanche, was where her and her husband lived up until his death. And we learn Rose, when her husband had passed on, and we learned that Dorothy is a divorcee after her husband left her for a younger woman.
A flight attendant, in fact.
There's a great joke there. I don't think we can pull it off on a PG podcast, but
it's worth watching the episode for that
that joke.
delivery.
Bea Arthur is so dry in her comedy; it's just amazing.
Yeah, but
they move to Miami to start a new life, and they find a want ad for roommates wanted with Blanche, and they enter the want ad, and this is where we pick up the story. They have been living with Blanche for a bit. It's never stated in the episode proper how long they've been living there, but the 3 of them live together with their pilot-only housekeeper or friend, or I'm not sure what
he's a cook.
He's a cook.
Yeah.
Coco, their gay friend, the fancy man, as Sophia calls him.
Yeah, there are a couple kind of, they were progressive jokes at the time. Now they have not aged terribly well. But I will say that Estelle Getty, Rue McClanahan, Bea Arthur, and Betty White all were kind of known to be very progressive and friends and allies of the LGBT community.
Betty White almost had her career ruined right at the start of it because she advocated for equality with black actors, having black actors on her original show. Sponsors were pulling out because she was having black actors and black musicians on her show.
Yeah, and specific to the fact that there is a gay cook in this first episode, both Rue McClanahan and Estelle Getty were known to be huge advocates for the gay community during the AIDS crisis, which was going on at the time. They were well known in the community for being advocates. B. Arthur as well. When she passed, you know, she left a large chunk of money to, you know, a center that helped homeless LGBT youth and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, all four of these women were great advocates and allies to the community. So the fact that this is here right from the first episode, not a mistake, okay? The fact that some of these jokes seem a little backwards today is a sign of progress, but not a sign of malice, let's say. Like even the jokes that are like, are like that. You know, like, you look at it and Sophia you go like,
Sophia doesn't look down on Coco just because he's gay. You know, she doesn't say any disparaging remarks. He just calls him a fancy man.
Yeah, it's just.
And like, in fact, the two end up friends at the end of the episode. Like, me and the fancy man are gonna go out are gonna go hang out later.
Yeah, and they're like, you know he's gay, right? And they're like, oh yeah, well of course we're just going to the dog track. We're gonna go bet on dog races. But so I think it's really kind of cool, but the only problem is that character did not work in the episode.
Yeah, I mean, this is his only appearance in the show.
Yeah, and when they retooled it, it doesn't work. But yeah, as they're worrying about their, you know, the living situation, the doorbell rings and they think it's going to be Blanche's boyfriend, and it turns out to be Sophia, who just wanders in and goes, well, my nursing home burned down. I live here now.
Yep.
So that's Sophia's entrance to the series. Is she's just like, you put me in a home and that burned down. Yeah. So I'm just gonna live with you now. And fortunately, there's a spare bedroom. So the interesting thing is that we do get an explanation in this first episode for why Sophia is kind of mean.
Yeah, they say Rose says that she had a stroke, which is probably why she ended up in the home to begin with. So yeah, she has no
filter.
No filter. I was going to say, I'm trying to find a way to say it. Yeah. She has no filter. She's just whatever is on her mind. She's just going to say it out loud. And oftentimes those end up being mean comments.
Yeah, they don't really bring it up, I guess, a lot in the rest of the series. At least I don't really remember it being a repeated thing in the series. It just becomes part of her personality.
I mean, honestly, if you hadn't watched the pilot and you just go by the episodes as they are, you just see her as this old woman who just doesn't care what anyone thinks. She's going to say whatever's on her mind, and if you don't like it, too bad. Which is probably why so many people love the character of Sophia. So as we go on with the rest of the thing, Rose starts getting a bad feeling about this marriage. Dorothy kind of plays it off, or you're just worried that we're going to get kicked out because she's going to have her new husband here. No, I need to tell Blanche something's wrong, I got a bad feeling. And it kind of does, because the wedding is here, you know, they have guests, they have the reverend, they have everything set up, but no groom. And they're wondering what's going on, what's taking so long. Even the group, even the reverend's like, I got a funeral to get to.
Like he says, it's Florida. I got a lot of funerals to get to.
Oh, has that aged well?
Well, no, but I mean, Florida's where you go to retire. So it's like, it's still, I mean, it's a little bit worse now, but it's an evergreen joke.
And of course, we get the policeman the policeman who has told Blanche that her boyfriend has been arrested because of bigamy. Apparently, he has married several women all around the country and was going to make Blanche the next wife of his.
Yeah, interestingly, the police officer is portrayed by Meshach Taylor, who is best known for his role on Designing Women, another show about a group of women in the southern-ish geographical area of the U.S. Florida is not the South, so I won't say it's the southern U.S., but
And this news devastates Blanche. She's like, she can't even speak. She can't read the note her boyfriend left for her. They mentioned that she hasn't gone to work in weeks. She's going to lose her job. She's just completely devastated over what happened. Which is very different to what the portrayal of Blanche in later episodes.
The characters are not quite set in this first episode. Sophia is basically Sophia. And like I said, B. Arthur is basically playing the same character she always plays in Dorothy, but Rose and Blanche here do kind of take a minute to get settled. It is interesting to see these two characters kind of work their way out. Like I said before, Blanche doesn't have her southern accent yet. She's also a bit more fragile. Rose talks about her needing a man, that Blanche really she needs to be with a man. She needs the companionship of a long-term relationship. And that Rose is very worried about what might happen to her. And Rose is more vicious, I guess you'd say, and a bit more with it. She's a bit more observant.
Yeah, not as naive as she would be in every other episode of the series.
Yeah,
but again, this is a pilot. They're still trying to work out who these characters are, and they haven't gotten there yet.
It's good, and the point is that the humor is there.
Yeah.
The jokes still land, even if some of them are dated. And you can see all of the pillars of the show. Blanche has already got her bawdiness to her. Rose is already a little bit dim. Even though it's not quite there yet, you can already see that they're setting that up. Dorothy and Sophia are pretty much set. And they've already got their
quirks are already in place.
Well, they've already got their rapport between them as mother and daughter. The thing that doesn't really work, of course, is Coco, unfortunately. And so that had to be retooled.
He was just quite literally a fifth wheel in this show. He doesn't do much in the first episode. He doesn't do much in his episode at all. He's just there. He cooks and then he just says a quick one-liner here and there. But it makes sense why this character was written out, because you really needed it didn't work with the dynamic of the four of them.
But it's good as a starter, and it's not as off-putting as a lot of television pilots are, where you're like, oh wow, they really had to make a lot of changes to make this work.
How did this show get greenlit with that pilot?
Yeah. But you can tell that they had almost all the pieces in place by the time they even filmed this, so that it's good. It's a good start to the series.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. So let's move on to season 2. Season 2, episode 5, Isn't It Romantic? Now, in this episode, Dorothy's old friend from school, Jean, has come over to visit after the passing of her partner, Pat. And I said, yeah, partner, because Jean is gay. Jean is a lesbian. This episode has to do with that. And Dorothy is, right off the bat, Dorothy is very accepting of her friend. She has known for years that Jean's gay. And the first shocker is Sophia knowing that Jean's gay. And I love the line that Sophia says is so perfect.
Jean is a nice person. She happens to like girls instead of guys. Some people like cats instead of dogs. Frankly, I'd rather live with a lesbian than a cat. Unless the lesbian sheds. That I don't know.
She's always known. She's never cared, as far as Sophia, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She always knew. She never cared. Sophia says during the episode that if one of her children had been gay, she also would not have cared. She just wants them to be happy. It becomes a thing of when Jean shows up, Dorothy asks, basically, how out are you? My mom figured it out on her own, but my roommates do not know, and I have not told them. Good allyship there, you know. It's not her place to have outed Jean, especially in a time when
this is 1986. So yeah,
1986. It's not necessarily the most open of times. Pat is a gender ambiguous name, so they had all just assumed that it was her husband that had recently passed. Dorothy says, you know, would you like me to tell them, or would you like me to just let them assume what they're going to assume? And Jean says, well, you know what? You know your roommates better than I do. You tell them based on how you think they're going to respond. Like, if it's going to be a problem for them, we'll just let them assume. If you think they're going to be accepting, I'm okay with them knowing I'm not really hiding.
And then in comes Rose with ice cream, and then Jean says, yeah, let's keep it a secret.
Yeah, Rose is so adorable because she decides that the best way to make Jean feel better over the recent death of her partner is to make clown-shaped ice cream sundaes with little sugar cone hats and jelly bean eyes and all that kind of stuff. So
it's adorable.
It's adorable, but also clowns, no, Rose, no. Ice cream, yes. Clowns, no. It turns out that Jean and Rose have a lot in common. They were both raised on farms, and they like the same kind of movies, and they like playing cards late into the night, and
they have a lot in common, and Jean starts to fall for Rose.
Yeah.
To the point where it kind of, Jean says maybe I shouldn't stick around much longer because she's not sure how Rose is going to react to finding out that Jean is a lesbian.
And that Jean is developing kind of strong feelings for Rose. And, Jean confides in Dorothy, and Dorothy ends up confiding in Sophia, who is staying in Dorothy's room so that Jean can have the spare room.
There's a nice B plot here where Sophia starts renting porn tapes.
Yeah. Sophia goes out to get her adult tapes from the video store and ends up coming down with a cold because she goes out in the rain to go to the Blockbuster to get her adult material.
Yeah.
These women need the internet so bad.
We couldn't find our adult material on the internet. We had to actually go to the video store and pay money to get. And also, of course, the running gag of Blanche trying to find Jean a man. Like, we're gonna go out into the town. We'll find a man, and Jean tries to be very, thanks but no thanks. Without letting on that she is gay, but hey, it's not my thing. Thank you but no thank you.
Well, she, she keeps saying, well, it's still too soon, and Blanche keeps saying, well, it's been a year, and, maybe you should get back out on the market, and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Finally, Dorothy tells Sophia, like, well, Jean is falling for Rose, and Sophia thinks that's hilarious, and then Dorothy starts laughing too, and Blanche overhears them laughing and comes in, and they finally tell Blanche, like, well, no, she's a lesbian and she's fallen for Rose. And after a funny little bit where Blanche thinks they said Lebanese, she finally figures it out, and then Blanche is just upset because why would she fall for Rose when she could have me? Which
That
is even
so
funnier.
That is so in character for Blanche, though.
Yeah. I'm much prettier than Rose. Why would she want Rose when she could have me? They all agree to stay quiet about it. Then, Sophia comes down with a cold, so she needs her room back, and
Quarantine for 5 days.
yeah, quarantine for 5 days, wear a mask for another 5 days, Jean and Rose stay up until 2 a.m. playing cards and talking, and, Rose says, well, we don't want to wake anybody else up for you, trying to get, why don't you just sleep in my room? And Jean ends up confessing her feelings, but Rose is so shocked that she pretends to be asleep, and,
She doesn't really know how to react to such a thing.
Yeah. And so the next morning, Jean packs up all her stuff and tries to leave, but
She's embarrassed,
Yeah.
She just confessed her feelings to someone who she already knows is not going to have those feelings back, and she's so embarrassed, she's just going to go home and just try to forget about the whole thing.
It's understandable, but Rose talks to her and she says, it was kind of mean of me to pretend to be asleep, but, I'm not good with all this, and I didn't know how to respond. I'm not gay, but if I were, you're very nice, and I'm sure I would return your affections. But I'm very sorry that I'm not gay, so I can't. Jean admits that, like, well, I knew that though, so that's
just for her, again, like you said,
yeah.
it's been a year since her partner died.
Yeah.
And this is the first time she's ever felt a connection with anyone since her partner.
Yeah.
So she just, had to say something.
Yeah.
But,
And
it all works out in the end. They're still friends, and even though there's no romance there, there's still a friendship, and,
And Rose does say that, like, if you feel like you need to leave, then that's fine. But if you feel like our friendship is enough, then please stay, because I like hanging out with you. And that's what Jean decides to do. That of course your friendship is enough. I like being friends with you. And that's kind of where we leave it. It's like,
I mean, again, for a show was made in the 1980s, as you said, during that height of the AIDS crisis, for a TV show to tackle the subject of gayness, to tackle that subject with more respect than most shows today do, that says something.
and this was far from their only episode.
Yeah.
This is just the one we chose to talk about because it centered on Rose, and we
needed a Betty White episode for this,
about Betty White. But there's of course the famous episode where Blanche's brother comes out, and then of course they come back to it when Blanche's brother decides to get married to his boyfriend, and they go through, should gay marriage be allowed? And Sophia has her great speech about, well, when a man and a woman declare their love, why are they are they doing that? Why do they want to stand up publicly and have a wedding? Well, why shouldn't a man and a man be able to do that, or a woman and a woman? You know, they had several episodes over the course of the run. And of course, like we said, they originally intended to just have a gay character as part of the show. It just didn't, that particular character didn't fit the tone of the show. They worked it in as often as they could.
They never played it up to stereotypical means. Like, we don't have the flamboyant male or the butch female.
Yeah. And even in this one where Rose is shocked to hear the admission, the thing is that the only joke we get about it is that Rose says to Dorothy the next morning, so everybody in the house knew that Jean was a lesbian except for me. And Dorothy said, well, honestly, we didn't know if you knew what the word lesbian meant. And Rose said, well, I could have looked it up. Which is really just a joke at Rose's expense rather than Jean's.
Yeah, it's playing up Rose's naivete.
Yeah, and the fact that she, like Blanche, didn't recognize the word lesbian. That they both understand the concept of lesbian, just not the terminology. Which I think is kind of adorable. But, you know, all the episodes that deal with the issue of homosexuality have the characters come up against a gay person and they just go, yep, that's a person. Moving on. And even Blanche, who has the most problems with it, is more just baffled rather than anything else. Like,
she's jealous of the whole thing. It's like, wait a minute.
Well, no, and she says, well, I can understand. I know what it means, but why wouldn't you want a man? A man has, you know, parts that I like, and that I don't understand not liking the things that I like, which I think is a kind of, you know, Blanche is such an egotistical character that it's understandable for her to go, but that's a me thing. I like things. Why don't you like the things that I like? But
there's a certain part of the male anatomy that she's very fond of. Why isn't everyone fond of that part of the body?
Yeah, why aren't people exactly like me? You know,
exactly, yeah.
And so, but once you explain to her that, like, well, no, Blanche, people are different from you, she kind of goes like, well, okay then, you know.
But like I said, I do like that. You know, once she understands what's going on, it's just, well, why would she want Rose when she could have me?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you okay, fine. If you don't want a man, at least want me. You know, like, it's a very adorable episode for Rose, and good character growth for Rose, and of course, Betty White is so sweet in it. It's a really good, just kind of thing for all the characters. Every character gets a really good bit in it, and there's no real B plot. The whole episode is just this. Again,
other than Sophia being addicted to adult movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, that's actually a pretty good episode. Again, showing respect to the LGBT community.
Yeah.
So let's move on to season 2, episode 21. This is an episode that I really want to talk about. Dorothy's prized pupil. In this episode, Dorothy is tutoring a young Latino boy, a little young Mario Lopez, a pre-Saved by the Bell Mario Lopez.
Yeah.
So, and tutoring him, and he writes this paper for school that is of what it means to be an American, talking about how his relatives came to America, and the first thing that they did while in America was go to a movie, and it was the camaraderie of all of these people enjoying a movie together that made them feel proud to be Americans. And we've all had that feeling, for lack of a better term, when we go see like a Marvel movie and everyone's cheering when the big hero moment comes. There's that sense of camaraderie, and that's a feeling that when his family came to America, they never felt that before. And to have that moment in a movie theater is such a big moment for him that he feels that's one of the great things about being an American. And Dorothy loves this paper so much that she's going to submit this paper for an award, a writing award, a local writing award, to which Mario wins. Mario's paper is selected as the winner of this competition. But in doing so, it brings light on his family, and it turns out that Mario and his family are in the country illegally, and they're in danger of being deported. And Dorothy is going to fight very hard to keep Mario and his family in the United States, because Mario really likes being an American. He writes, the entire point of him writing that paper was how much he loves living in America, and he doesn't want to go back to Mexico.
Interestingly, I mean, you say Mexico, but interestingly, the episode never specifies where his family is from.
And I think it's on purpose. And I say Mexico because Mario Lopez is Latino, and there's not many Latin countries that has that thing. I mean, let's be honest, that's kind of that's immigration from Mexico has been a really touchy subject over the last few years. Like,
yeah, and I get why that's like the first thing,
If it was Puerto Rican, it wouldn't be much of an issue.
And in the 80s, that's I mean, Puerto Ricans are American citizens. Mm-hmm. But it's in the 80s, everybody would have immediately thought Mexican, but we've had a lot of, Colombian immigration.
It could be Cuban.
A little bit, Cuban immigration, a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of countries it could have been, which I think is why it's left intentionally vague in the episode. It's interesting that Dorothy never once kind of picks up on the fact that this might be an issue, because once it becomes a problem, Mario does kind of point out to her, I talked about my first day in America. He kind of points out to the clueless white woman, like, why didn't, because she says, like, it never occurred to me that you might be undocumented. And he kind of pointed out, like, I wrote it in my paper. Like, yeah, it's not explicit, but my paper is all about my first day in America and going to a movie with my family on our first day in America. And she kind of says, like, well, but I didn't really think it was like a true story. I mean, I hate to say it, but it really is such an overlooked thing for a lot of people. Specifically a lot of white people who were born in the U.S., it's just not something we really always think about.
Yeah, you take it for granted.
Yeah.
Then you have immigrants who come to the country for the first time, experience what U.S. citizens experience every day, and it's just this great wonder to them, and it makes them, proud to live in the country. Things that, again, I was born in the United States, so there are things that I do every day that people in other countries may not have the luxury of doing. So they come to this country and do that for the first time, and it's this amazing, wonderful thing.
But also, we don't ever want to think that, and part of it is that you don't want to be accused of racism either. Mm-hmm. Of the, like, well, how exactly did you come here? Did you come here the right way? You know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that is one thing this show does as well, is that we never have none of these characters are ever shown to be overtly racist.
well, I mean, we'll see it a future episodes that a couple of the characters are a little bit, but
I mean,
the
as far as this episode is concerned, I'm talking specifically
Yeah.
about this episode.
yeah, specifically about this episode, none of the characters really seem to care or are upset that Mario's family came in undocumented.
They just
But-
see him as a good kid.
Yeah, they see him as a good kid and him and his family as worthy of being in the U.S. Interestingly, though, you do wonder if he was a troubled kid or a kid who didn't make good grades, or if his English was not as good, would they see him in the same way?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we never really explore that in this episode.
One of the things that I found interesting about this was that the faith that the women have in the justice system.
Yeah, it's like, all you have to, state your case and justice will be served and you'll be able, you and your family will be able to stay in the country.
The Shirley exception.
Yeah.
Surely an exception will be made. You're one of the good ones. But things don't always go that way.
And it doesn't in this episode. The judge says that Mario and his family have to go back to their home country.
Immediately. I mean,
Immediately.
They deport them like the next day.
Even-
The swiftness of TV, of course.
Yeah, it's
But
30-minute sitcom. We have to keep this going.
yeah.
But they say, we'll go tomorrow and we'll take care of it. Well, I'm not going to be in this country tomorrow. And Dorothy's, so I'll fight for you. I'll make sure you come back. And the thing about this being a sitcom in the era that it's in, we never kind of see Mario ever again.
We never
Granted,
find out.
Yeah, we never find out. Granted, it's because, again, not long after the Saved by the Bell starts, so we'll go from there.
Yeah.
The subject of immigration in this episode, like I said, they are not afraid to tackle the serious subjects in this show, like from immigration to homosexuality to any and all, and we'll get to another serious subject in a minute. But I think that's another reason why this show is so fondly remembered. Yes, you have the dynamic of these four amazing actors, but this show doesn't really pull punches. So they will tackle the heavy subjects when they need to.
And I do kind of like that there's not a happy ending.
And that is a little bit realistic, honestly.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that this was tackled better later on the revival of Murphy Brown.
Mm.
There's an episode kind of similar to this where Murphy Brown accidentally exposes the family of, I think, like an intern of hers or something. They discover that his parents are undocumented, and they end up reporting on their arrest and deportation live on like Christmas or something. They kind of show the brutality of it, of the family being separated, because the kid is a dreamer, and at the time, under the rules, he was allowed to stay, but his parents were not. And so his parents were taken away. They ended up, recording and live airing what was happening to them, and showing the effects. But the thing is it was still kind of their fault. because they accidentally tipped off immigration to where this family was. And so it's a very similar story, and it ended in a very similar way, but I think it was handled with a little bit more nuance. But in this, Dorothy does understand that, like, it wasn't her intention. Her intention was to do a good thing for a talented writer, in her class, a talented student who deserved recognition, but unfortunately, because of the system, that recognition ended up getting him kicked out and losing him the opportunity that she had hoped to afford him.
And you could see the guilt on her face. Like, this is my fault. If I hadn't submitted his essay, he would still be in the country.
Yeah. And maybe he could have found another way, but unfortunately, there may not have been another path for him. We don't know,
Yeah. And that is a very heavily serious subject. So the B plot handles most of the comedy. And in the B plot of the episode, President Ronald Reagan is in town, and Blanche wants to meet the president. So she's all dolled up to meet the president. She wants to wear these special earrings to meet the president that she had said she'd let Rose borrow. And then Rose said, no, I gave you back your earrings. And then there's a whole fight over these lost earrings. And Rose says, well, to make it up for losing the earrings, I will be your servant for the time being until I can find the earrings. I know they're in this house. I will find them. But until that point, I will be your servant and do what you say to make up for the lost earrings.
Yeah, and she has a whole back in St. Olaf story to explain this, but it really is the old sitcom trope of, we made a bet and now you have to be my servant for a set period of time.
And Blanche at first Blanche's like, no, I don't really want a servant, and she's my friend. I don't want to do that to her. But she kind of gets real used to it real quickly. Also considering the fact that Blanche grew up on a plantation.
Yeah, she grew up rich with actual servants, so she falls back into that real easy.
And that plot point comes up when one of Blanche's one-night stands comes over to the house saying, oh, yeah, while Blanche was at my place, she left her earrings and her watch. So Rose recognizes that that's her watch. So
that Blanche did not ask to borrow.
So yeah. So now the tables have turned, and you know what I said? What happens when you cross Rose?
Yeah.
She gets Blanche back. Because at the end of the episode, Dorothy is so devastated over the fact that it is her fault that Mario and her family got deported. It's like, don't worry. For now, just relax. We'll make you some sandwiches. We'll put the TV in your room. You can just forget about the world. And then Blanche, you heard me. Do the thing.
Yeah. I liked the tables turning bit. I also liked that when Blanche is saying that, like, oh, I'm not sure I want all this to happen, that Sophia steps in and is like, well, you want to be somebody's servant? You can be my servant. You can do all my laundry. You can get things for me. I'm okay for it.
All right, we are going to move on to Season 5, Episode 1 and 2, a rare two-parter for the Golden Girls, Sick and Tired. In this episode, Dorothy has come down with some sort of mysterious illness. She is tired all the time. And and she gets so sick to a point where she cannot speak, to the point where she loses her job as a teacher. We actually get a reference where one of the Golden Girls actually loses their job. It's never on screen, but it's mentioned in dialogue that Dorothy loses her job as a teacher because she no longer has the energy to stand in front of a classroom and at times cannot get words out of her mouth. This one dealing with the subject of chronic illness. We have talked about before, you, Kiki, do suffer from chronic illness. So this one kind of, hit a chord for you.
Yeah, this one hit on several levels, and it was when we talked about doing Golden Girls, this was kind of the first episode I was like, oh, I really want to talk about this episode. This, interestingly, I mentioned my grandmother being a Golden Girls fan. This episode actually convinced my grandmother to go to the doctor, and start talking to the doctor. And she actually ended up with the same diagnosis that Dorothy receives in this episode. She credited this episode with helping her kind of figure out what to say and how to express herself and stuff when weird things started happening to her. Although I do not share the same diagnosis, I share a very similar one.
Similar symptoms, yeah. And
yeah.
In this episode, Dorothy goes to several doctors, even going to a specialist in New York.
Yeah, she travels from Miami to New York
to see a specialist, and no one can find anything wrong with her. You're perfectly fine. Nothing is wrong with you. All the tests come up negative. And they think that Dorothy is making up her illness. That they even tell her to go to psychiatrists because the illness is all in your mind. And she does, and they find nothing wrong with her. And this goes on and on and on. Dorothy keeps saying, I know that I'm sick. I cannot get out of bed some days. I cannot talk some days. There is something wrong with me, and no one knows what it is. This gets Sophia worried because this is her daughter. Something's wrong with my daughter. No one knows what it is. We don't even know if she could die from this or not. And it's great acting from Estelle Getty playing up the mother role rather than being the smart aleck Sophia. We see that caring mother Sophia that we rarely see in the show, that she's worried about her daughter's health.
Yeah.
And we also get Rose, who is, I believe my friend. If you say you're sick, I'm going to believe that you're sick. So we're going to do this together. We're going to find what's wrong with you. And Blanche is too stuck up in her own world in B plot. And doesn't believe anything that Dorothy says.
Well, it's less that she doesn't believe Dorothy and more that Dorothy says, I'm sick, and she, Blanche has decided she's going to write a book. So, Dorothy says, I'm sick, and she goes, yes, my heroine will be sick. She will be sick and wasting away, but beautiful, not like you. It's like, and then she kind of goes off into her own little world,
She goes into her B plot. She tries to write a book, and it kind of goes nowhere because when she finally shows the manuscript to Rose, it makes no sense at all. Like the story, like it's not even. She tries to read it, and it's like incomprehensible what she's writing down. Mostly because she's writing it on no sleep for 72 hours, but still.
Yeah.
But so that's pretty much all of the main points of the B plot. So we want to stick with the A plot here. So she goes to various doctors. One doctor is straight up mocking her. Like, you're wasting my time. There's nothing wrong with you. You're like, if you want to waste money going to doctor after doctor to tell you the same thing, go ahead. But it's not wrong. You're old. What's wrong with you is that you're old. You're not in your 30s anymore. What's happening to you is age. I get tired. My wife gets tired. Everyone gets tired. You know what? It's probably depression because you're getting old. My wife had it. What she did, she went to the hairdresser, changed her hair color, and now she's fine. So that's what I recommend to you. Go to a hairdresser, change your hair color, and you'll be fine. You'll just need a change. As, again, someone with that chronic illness, that probably struck that nerve on you as well.
The thing is that especially, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen to men, because I do know men that it happens to. But if you're a woman, or perceived as a woman, because, I know trans friends and, non-binary friends and such that it has happened to as well. But especially for people who are perceived as female, if you go to a doctor and you're like, well, I'm sick, and it's not immediately apparent what's wrong with you, if they can't run a very easy test and go like, oh, well, this test shows it, or, oh, your arm is broken, it's very easy to see, you generally get diagnosed either crazy, or, if you're overweight, fat. Or sometimes both.
Yeah. Well, the diagnosis is you're overweight. Lose some weight and you'll be fine.
Yeah, lose some weight. Go take some antidepressants or something. And leave me alone. It is very demoralizing. I mean, we see in the episode, this episode gets everything right. I will tell you that I'm in quite a few support groups for people with chronic illness and disability. When new people come in, especially if they're at the beginning of the process, and they've either just gotten their diagnosis and they're working through the feelings, or they are still, they know something's wrong with them, but they haven't been able to get a diagnosis yet. Watching this is frequently recommended because it gets everything right. It's really impressive how correct this is. I don't know if the writer went through it herself, or maybe went through this with a family member, but bravo to her, because it is exact of what this process is like, but condensed into basically an hour. It is heartbreaking, the moment when Dorothy comes back to the hotel room that she's sharing with Rose, and Rose is talking about King
Her
Kong
day, yeah.
and everything. She's just kind of jabbering on about her day, and Dorothy just bursts into tears on the bed, and she says, I don't know, maybe I am crazy. I have nothing to point to. I just know how I feel. I just know that there are days that I can't move any part of my body. I know that there are days when, she says in the episode, lifting my arms just to wash my hair in the shower is too much for me. Opening my mouth to speak is too much for me. She says, but they can't find anything. Doctor after doctor just looks at me and says, you are fine. And maybe I am crazy. Nobody else sees it, so maybe it's just me. And Rose has to help her assert her reality, which is so bizarre, because Rose is the one that we always think of as not living in reality. you know?
Yeah.
And Rose has to look at her and say, like, no, I see my friend, and I see my friend not being able to do the things she used to do. I look at you and I know you are sick. And I look at you and you tell me that you feel sick. So I know that that is true. And I will stand by you, and we will go to every doctor on the planet until we figure out what's wrong. That is such a powerful moment of just Rose being like, no, you know, you are going to do this thing, and I will be there with you.
True friend.
Yeah.
We even get a sort of a crossover because we get Richard Mulligan as Dr. Henry Weston from Empty Nest.
Yeah, there is the spin-off crossover there. And the nurse as well.
Yeah. I assume that because Empty Nest was following the Golden Girls at the time, and this was a 1 hour special, they kind of they put the character there to kind of, okay, you're usually watching Empty Nest. Here's the stars of Empty Nest. We can move on. Well, so yeah, Dr. Harry Weston gives, with what you've described to me, there's a doctor in this hospital that's a specialist in that field. I'm gonna get you an appointment with that doctor, and we'll see once and for all what's wrong with you. Sophia kind of butters up to the doctor because the doctor is Asian, so Sophia means well, but it is questionable.
Yeah, it is super racist. But she means well, but it is very much that kind of racism.
I love Japanese food. I love Japanese people. Japanese invented this, that, and the other, without even knowing what ethnicity.
Chinese, she says, but yeah, it's all that same thing, you know.
Yeah.
Like you're all so smart, and you're also, you know, and you're just like, please, Sophia, stop talking. This is painful.
And Dorothy even tries to say, stop talking. You're not helping that matters. And so the specialist says, based on what you've described and based off this, you have chronic fatigue. I guess at the time it was considered a new ailment, or at least not a recognized ailment among all doctors.
I mean, there are still some doctors that will not believe it's a thing. I'm not gonna lie.
And Dorothy is relieved. She finally knows what's wrong with her. She knows that there's something wrong with her. She knows it has a name, and she knows what to do with it. And unfortunately, there's no cure. You're just going to have to live with it. You're just going to have to not overexert yourself. And unfortunately, you know, you're going to have to learn to live with this illness. But maybe there can be something in the future that could remedy this. Unfortunately, there still isn't in 2022.
The thing is that in the episode, he gives a definitive cause. That's not exactly accurate. Although, interestingly, he gives the cause as a virus. I will say it's no longer called just chronic fatigue syndrome now. It's called myalgic encephalomyelitis. I can speak / chronic fatigue syndrome. So ME/CFS is the current name for it. Like I said, this was what my grandmother was diagnosed with at the time, and yes, at the time it was basically a brand new diagnosis. He gives the cause as a virus. The interesting thing, and Tuesday has heard me speak about this privately, but we're dealing now in the age of COVID with people who are getting long COVID. A lot of my friends, I have several friends who are diagnosed with ME/CFS. That is very similar to my personal diagnoses as well. The primary of which is fibromyalgia. And all of these things are kind of very nebulous in there. We don't exactly know what causes them, but for all of them, a initial viral trigger has been looked at for years. But now that long COVID is being studied, a lot of us who have these various syndromes are looking at the symptoms of long COVID and going, these are basically all of our symptoms. And if you look at what Dorothy is being told that she has, it sounds, if you watch it today, you would look at, boy, it sounds like she has long COVID before she gets her diagnosis. So a lot of us are now kind of hoping that the medical community, if we can ever get to the point where the medical community can restabilize and start going back to, researching other things other than COVID, that we might go back and look at viral triggers a little more heavily, because more and more of us are beginning to think that at some point we came into contact with some type of virus, and we probably just got a mild illness at the time, and then 6 months or a year later or something, our bodies started going haywire. Because honestly, if you weren't in the middle of a global pandemic, do you remember every time you got a mild cold or a mild flu-like illness?
No.
And most people cannot, because it's so common. Coronaviruses in general and influenza viruses in general are so very common. And now that we know that COVID-19 can cause these long-term symptoms, the question becomes, well, have other coronaviruses also been causing these things in people in various forms? And so it might be that Dorothy and other people with, CFS, ME/CFS, and people like me with fibromyalgia and stuff, that we may have come into contact with something, some form of coronavirus or other virus that changed our bodies permanently. And that's what's wrong with us. And that now, unfortunately, some people who are getting COVID, that their bodies are changing in the same way. And it's unfortunate. It might be a breakthrough for all of us.
Yeah.
Because of this now. But as far as the episode goes, this does serve as sort of a wish fulfillment. I'm gonna say
the ending of the episode, they're at a restaurant, celebrating that they know what's wrong with Dorothy now.
And I'm going to say this probably seems weird to anyone who has never gone through something like this. Mm-hmm. The idea that you would celebrate a diagnosis. But for those people who have been through it, getting a diagnosis, even if it's something like, well, it sucks, you're going to have to go through it for the rest of your life, but there's something called naming the beast. Mm. And being able to name the beast after not knowing what's following you and attacking you for potentially years. Dorothy says she's been sick for a matter of months, like 5 months, I think she says in the episode. But some people, this is a process of years before they can get a diagnosis. So imagine being stalked by something for years and not knowing what it is. And then one day somebody says like, oh, that's a werewolf. And finally you're like, a werewolf? Okay, silver bullets. Or oh, it's a vampire. I just wear garlic around my neck. And at least it'll keep it away when I'm, or only go out during the daylight. And put up crucifixes around my house. And at least that'll keep it away from me for a little bit. I'm a little bit safer now because I know what the beast is. And it really does make you feel better. At least I have a name for it now.
That's what they go through in the episodes. Like, I know what's wrong with me now. I know how to take care of this.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah, I'm not crazy, yeah.
And so they go out for a nice dinner and some champagne.
And they run into the sarcastic doctor that called her crazy and said, go to a hairdresser.
Yeah, in the weirdest coincidence, that New York doctor happens to be vacationing in Miami, and they run into him at the restaurant, which, like I said, is just wish fulfillment of the strangest kind. Because I think everybody who's been through this really wants to be able to run into that doctor and be able to tell him off. And that's what Dorothy gets to do here. She sees that doctor and she's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to tell this guy what for. And she does.
Yeah, tells him off. You need better bedside manner. You forgot why you became a doctor. And he said, I don't have to sit this. And then, the doctor's wife said, sit down. And it's like, it feels like this is not the first time this situation has happened. This is not the first time that she had to hear that her husband, the doctor, had bad bedside manner. And she's going to make sure her husband hears this.
Or maybe she had a similar experience with a doctor and just never got to confront him. Because so many women I know have had some kind of experience of a doctor not listening to them.
And she even says it. If I was a man, you probably would have listened to me. But because I'm a woman, you're calling me crazy.
Yeah. Dorothy gets to say, I almost wish that every doctor beginning their training could have a moment where they get sick and very scared just so they know what it's like. I still have enough empathy in me to wish that on the day that you get sick, you have a better doctor than you were to me.
And B. Arthur plays that scene so well.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it really is such a good and powerful moment. And it is such wish fulfillment. It's so cathartic to watch if you've ever had to deal with that situation, because it is just not everything you've ever wanted to say, because she does say that the things that she wants to say are just not appropriate, but
they're not appropriate for primetime TV.
Yeah. The things you want to say in those situations cannot be said on a primetime sitcom in the US, but it is something at least. And it's a good episode, and it does really hit all the major beats. And if you've never seen it, I really recommend that you watch it so that you do maybe have a little bit of understanding for the people in your life who have been through this, because it really is just such an amazing episode, possibly their best. And it really has helped. A lot of people have said it helped them. Like I said, it made my grandmother go to a doctor and end up with her own diagnosis. It certainly has helped a lot of us in the community deal with our own feelings throughout the years, and it's still helping a lot of people today. It ends with a great joke of them finding out that Rose has accidentally ordered a bottle of champagne they cannot possibly afford, and Sophia ending up using what she calls an old Sicilian trick of pretending that the champagne has turned by pouring salt in her glass and making the waiter taste it, and ends up getting their entire meal for the night comped. So it's a good little tag there at the end.
Yeah.
Good old Sophia.
And now we'll just get to the final episode we're going to discuss today. Season 6, episode 21, Witness. And it's weird because both the A and B plot seem to have equal representation in this episode, and there's also a weird C plot involving Sophia's glasses.
Yeah, it's one that we've got intersecting things, because the C plot is actually part of the B plot, or part of the A plot, I guess. The A plot is deals with a recurring character who's throughout this season, or throughout the seasons 5 and 6. It's one of Rose's boyfriends, probably, I think, Rose's most recurring boyfriend in the series.
Yeah, Miles, who had to go into witness protection after witnessing a mob boss, the Cheese Man.
Yeah, the story behind Miles is that he met Rose, and he says he's a former college professor, and they hit it off very well and everything. And then she finds out that he isn't actually a college professor. He's actually in the witness protection program and has been moved to Miami, given this fake identity as a former college professor named Miles. Not even his real name. His name was Nick, I think. He's from Chicago, and in Chicago he worked for a mob boss, was the accountant to the mob, and he witnessed a lot of crime, and then he turned into a witness, which is why the episode is named that, and ends up in witness protection. The mob boss turns up dead, though, and so he decides, like, well, I don't need to be in witness protection anymore because the guy who wanted to kill me for spilling all his secrets is dead. So, we can go. You can come back to Chicago with me and be my wife, and it'll be great. And then they find out that the mob boss is not actually dead, and so he has to go back into witness protection and leave Rose. So he has been missing for a while in this episode, but Rose has been pining for him and everything. But she starts dating again. So she's got a new boyfriend.
And unbeknownst to her, her new boyfriend is the mob boss who's trying to kill Miles.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, I was expecting you to fill in his fake identity there because I had forgotten it. But you went straight to the reveal. But yeah, it's actually the Cheese Man. And that's where the plot about Sophia's missing glasses comes in. Sophia's just wandering through the episode, not knowing what's gone on. And she gets their neighbor, Barbara, who is a police officer, to look for her missing glasses. Barbara is Barbara Weston from the Empty Nest TV series. So
we have another Empty Nest crossover episode.
Yeah, your Empty Nest crossover for this. They did a lot of those in these seasons. She wanders around, mostly unable to see throughout this episode, which becomes a plot point. Miles shows up during the course of this episode and says, he's dressed as an Amish man. It says that he's been hiding out with the Amish.
As Samuel.
As Samuel. And that he really hates it, and he wants to come back for Rose. He misses Rose and everything. And it turns out that, like you said, her new boyfriend is actually the cheese head in disguise, but not really, who finds Miles, gets all of them at gunpoint. And it's only when Sophia puts back on her glasses when Barbara shows up and says, I found your glasses. Like
they were outside.
They were outside, and like the neighbor's cat got him or something, I think. I don't know. But she puts back on her glasses and immediately goes, "Hey, look, it's the Cheesehead. I saw him on America's Most Wanted." They joke around about how it was the most watched episode, and But he's holding them all at gunpoint, and Rose says, "Oh, well, Barbara's a cop. She's going to arrest you." And they have a whole back and forth about Barbara says, "Well, I don't have a gun on me," and everything, and waits until the Cheesehead lets his guard down, and then it turns out she does in fact have a gun on her. She just lied. It's okay to lie to bad guys, Rose, because Rose is very upset that she lied. And Rose says, "Well, see, there's just so many things us civilians don't know. I just, Barbara says, "Well, call the station, tell them to send backup, and I'm going to need some handcuffs." And everybody just immediately turns to Blanche and stares. And then Blanche goes, "Okay, fine, you can borrow my handcuffs, but be careful, they were a gift." Which is probably the best joke in the entire episode.
The reason we chose this episode is for the B plot.
Yeah, the B plot to this one is really good and much, much better than the A plot. The A plot is just tying up the long-running thing about
the Miles storyline, yeah.
Yeah. The B plot, however, deals with Blanche and Blanche's southernness. Blanche wants to join the Daughters of the Confederacy, I think they call it in this one, which is a social group for women who have Southern heritage.
Pure Southern heritage.
Pure Southern heritage. And as part of their initiation, they have to research their family tree and present it and read it out in front of the group to prove how pure their Confederate, and they do use the word Confederate, heritage is. And they show at the initiation ceremony that if anybody takes umbrage to your heritage, one woman says, "Oh, well, I know that, that ancestor of yours used to sell horseshoes to Yankees, so, boo to you, you're not fit to be in the group, you traitor,
Mm-hmm.
But in researching her pure Southern heritage, Blanche finds out that she has not only a Yankee ancestor who was born in Buffalo, New York, but that her Yankee ancestor was actually a Feldman, a Jew. So you've got two big reveals in her heritage.
And Dorothy just makes fun of her for the rest of the episode, calling her Yankee Doodle Dandy and,
humming bits from her Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
At her. But I kind of wanted to talk about this because if you do not live in the South, you may not realize that this is a thing. Like, I don't know, Tuesday, did you realize this is a thing?
I did not until we were doing research for this episode.
Yeah, these groups are a thing in the South. And while the way they portray this kind of initiation ceremony of, like, reading out your family tree and stuff, okay, that may not be, like, exactly the way it's done. Yeah, this bit about, like, the family trees and proving your pure heritage and stuff, for some of these groups, yeah, there are slightly more mainstream groups that try to do the whole, like, well, it's all about historical preservation and things like that. But yeah, there are groups like this, okay, and they kind of dance around it. Let's not mince words. Like, Blanche is joining a very genteel white supremacist group in this episode.
Like I said, it was only for that one episode, not all of them.
Yeah. But
yeah, this is just a pure, as you said, pure Southern, pure white.
Yeah,
and
that's why finding the, no, they say, oh, it's a Yankee. The fact that she finds a Jewish ancestor is not an accident. Okay, that's what the group's really going to take offense at the end of the day. It's a very well done episode because, like I said, they do kind of dance around the topic. They say the thing without saying the thing. My father had been approached by some of these groups at one point and, asked if he wanted to join the kind of, male version of some of these groups. And when he said no, a man asked him, like, what's wrong? Didn't you have ancestors that fought for the South? And my father's response was, yes, and I consider that an embarrassment every single day, which did not go over well.
I mean, we see that in real life. I mean, that's even today. There are groups that, that on the surface say we're about culture, we're about our ancestry, we're about history. Pride.
I mean, that they say history. That is what they are there to,
heritage and stuff like, this is our heritage. And it's really just, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into it, but yeah. And Blanche, she kind of gets it by the end of the episode. She tries to say, yes, my great grandmother was a Yankee. Yes, my great grandmother was Jewish. But aren't we, I'm still Southern. I'm still here. I was born here. I'm just as much Southern as anyone else here, but also, we're all Americans. Shouldn't we all, yes, it's more of I'm trying to cover my own butt to get into this group, but she does make valid points, even if she's doing it from a selfish point of view.
Well, the thing is that she very quickly realizes what the group is about because she says the things that they claim to be about. She says, I don't want to read my family tree. I want to tell you what the South means to me. And the woman running the group says, no, we need your family tree.
We don't care what you think about the South.
Yeah, we don't care what the South means to you. Family tree.
Yeah.
And then she starts to read the family tree, and then she says, like, well, yeah, I had an ancestor who was a Yankee, but that doesn't matter. And they're like, no, it matters. And then she goes like, well, yeah, my ancestor was Jewish, but the point is she came down to the South and assimilated into the South. Yeah, no, she didn't. She very quickly realizes that all that veneer that this group is saying about history and culture and heritage, that doesn't matter because that is absolutely Blanche's heritage.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, she was raised on a plantation. She was raised rich. She talks, we skipped over it in the previous episode, but in one of the previous episodes we watched, in the episode about immigration, she talks about her father running down a horse thief on a horse, dragging him to the courthouse, her having to choose between a cotillion dress, does she want to wear the cotillion dress to testify in court? I mean, these are very Southern things of a specific type of Southern, namely rich white Southern, So she has all of the markers they are looking for, but she's got that one quote unquote stain to them in her family tree. And that's what they care about.
Yeah, she even says, let go, why do we need to have these prejudices? Why can't we all accept each other as, daughters of the South? And it's like, no, it doesn't matter. No.
Yeah.
You have this blemish in your family history. You are not welcome.
And the thing is that when she starts defending herself, notices that she uses the word American, but they don't care about American. They care about Confederate. And newsflash, for anybody who doesn't actually understand history, Confederates weren't American. That was the entire point of the war.
We had an entire war about this.
We don't want to be American anymore. We want to be the Confederacy. You go be America. You go be the United States of America. We're going to be the Confederate States. Okay, it's like we had a whole war about that.
And in one final act of defiance, Blanchett says, "You lost the war. Get over it."
Yeah, and that's her final parting shot, and that's what causes the rest of the girls to stand up and applaud, like, because they are not into this. The rest of the girls are not. They will be there to support Blanche because Blanche is their friend and everything, but they are not into this.
And there are the other women in this group are fainting at the mere thought of anything that Blanche is saying at this podium, because, like you said, it's not about how much you love the South or how much it means to you or anything about that. It matters what your bloodline is, and if you have that blemish, they don't want you. And her being defiant, telling them to where to stick it, it's just, how dare you?
Yeah, and it's really sad because, the point of those groups are not about love of place or love of culture or, love of history even. It's about love of purity. And we talked about how Golden Girls is not afraid to shy away from
those subjects, yeah.
Those subjects, and here they are talking about another one of those subjects. I mean, they and I think they knew it. They have this character who is so very proud of her southernness and, talks about her days on the plantation, and they realize, like, we do have to address this at some point. And this is them addressing it.
There's one, okay, since we're finished with this one, there's one note I want to say before we wrap this up. Is that during the production of the show, and even after the show had ended, I don't know how to put this nicely, but when Betty White passed, obviously, the other Golden Girls will be there on the other side and will welcome her and blah, blah, blah. B. Arthur did not like Betty White. No one knows why. Even Betty will admit to this. Like, B. Arthur did not like her at all. Granted that they were professionals. They worked with each other. But B. Arthur famously did not like Betty White. And no one knows why. Some have...
Possibly the only person on the planet who didn't?
Yeah, because there were interviews with B later in life, and she would go on and on how, Estelle was so wonderful and Rue was kind, but when it came to talk about Betty White, she said, "Well, Betty's a C word." That's all I'll say. That was her final word on Betty White. B. Arthur said that Betty is a C word. And so far, she seems to be the only person to have ever said anything bad about Betty White. I don't know. Not even Betty White knows.
Well, the interesting thing is that B. Arthur's son did kind of talk about this. And her son said that his mother always seemed to need someone at work that she had beef with. It was weird. He said that he didn't know why, but that his mother seemed to need someone on a set that she could turn into her nemesis. And that on Golden Girls, it seemed to be Betty White. And that it was possibly because they had different acting training. Like, polar opposite.
I had heard something like that it was just because B was very much classic trained method actor, very serious about the profession, and Betty was always very lighthearted about the profession, and they just clashed over that.
Betty was very improvisational. She was not afraid to play with an audience because she came from like live TV, variety shows and stuff like that, where it was permissible to break the fourth wall, to play with your audience and stuff. B. Arthur was much more a theater actor where you do not do that. Like, no matter what happens, there is that separation. B. Arthur was kind of that similar portrayal to Dorothy, kind of off camera too, from what I hear. And Betty White was a very optimistic, positive, playful, dare you say perky kind of person. That would probably get grating, I guess, to somebody with that more serious attitude. And so that may have also done it. I'm not sure how much of that was like true hatred on B. Arthur's part and more just, you know how there are some people where you're like, I can be around them, but I don't want to go out for drinks with this person later. You know, and maybe that was B. Arthur's thing, and then it just kind of became a joke, like a bit, because she did have that kind of dry wit. I don't know. It does seem to be kind of odd that the one person that seemed to have something bad to say about Betty White was B. Arthur.
Who knows?
Even the bad things she had to say about Betty White were so tame. It was just kind of like, I don't like, she's a professional, but I don't want to like go on vacation with her, you know? Like,
yeah.
Which is a very mild thing to say. Like, if that's the worst somebody can say about you when you're gone, you've lived a pretty good life, you know?
And, you know, it's been said, you know, Betty White lived to 99 and 2 weeks shy of her 100th birthday. Be the kind of person that you live to 99 and people say you still died too soon.
You know, we tried to do, because we've talked about doing a Golden Girls retrospective for a little bit now. And so we wanted to do just a blanket, you know, kind of overview of some episodes that we really wanted to talk about. So we didn't do, like, this wasn't a deep dive on Rose. But it is Betty White's birthday. You know, this episode is coming out on what would have been Betty's 100th birthday. I want to say that between Rose and Sue Ann Niven, you know, maybe Mary Tyler Moore show is owned by Disney now, so maybe we'll do a Mary Tyler Moore,
maybe
a Sue Ann retrospective at some point. Two of the more interesting female characters on TV, and couldn't be more different. Just such an interesting woman. And she's, you know, if you want to do something in her memory, it's been asked that you donate time or money or something to either one of the animal charities she personally supported or just to your local animal rescue. To be honest, the local animal rescues probably need it more right now. I know that she had talked about that she wasn't afraid of death because she knew she would be going back, or at least she hoped. She said she never claimed to know anything for sure, but she hoped that wherever she'd be going after death, that she would be back with her true love, her husband, Alan Ludden. And so every time I think now, I just keep thinking that hopefully she got to see him again.
Until then, this is Alan Ludden saying the password tonight is...
Home. Will you take me home, please, Mr. Ludden?
I certainly will, Miss Ludden. Thank you. Good night.
I don't think it really needs to be said, but we're going to do it anyway. Kiki, does the Golden Girls have the magic?
Absolutely.
Agreed. Absolutely. This show still is funny all of these years later. Some of the jokes don't quite stick. Some of the jokes are, but most of the jokes still land, and they land hard. And I was sitting here watching these episodes, and I just found myself laughing my butt off, just remembering how funny this show was, how amazing these four women are. And just, if you have never seen the Golden Girls, do yourself a favor. And if you're in the States, it's on Hulu. You can watch it. If you're in other countries, it is likely on Disney Plus. Go and watch it. Do yourself a favor and watch this great classic sitcom. You will not be disappointed. So let's move on from talking about four women to talking about three men.
Well, four.
Four. Okay, fine, four. We're counting the other guy. We're counting because next week we are talking about The Three Musketeers. That is the 1993 Disney version. All for one and all for love.
Yeah.
So join us for that. Rest in peace, Betty White. You will always be missed. And we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. And Tuesday?
Yeah.
Thank you for being a friend.
Thank you for being a friend.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.